The other thing from State of Play that caught our attention was the fact that Mark Cerny popped up at the end to announce that more games, perhaps unsurprisingly, will be receiving PlayStation 5 Pro updates. And literally, as I'm talking about this introduction here, I believe Oliver has added a link to the PlayStation blog, which has a number of quotes from developers talking about how they're going to be utilizing the new hardware. But we did get to see a big bunch of announcements in the State of Play for titles that are coming. I also like the way Oliver has talked about... he sort of highlighted the ones that he found interesting and the ones that he found less interesting.
Good.
Let's talk about the less interesting ones first, because they're still going to be impactful. All of the Insomniac games, for example, are going to be getting upgrades to PlayStation 5 Pro, which is a great thing, right? And I assume that it's going to follow the same sort of pattern as Ratchet and Clank, where the biggest opportunities lie in enhancing the performance RT modes. Oliver, you actually spoke to Insomniac on site, so I'm wondering if you've got any further details there.
Well, I think based off of their PS5 Pro upgrades for Spider-Man 2 and Ratchet and Clank, this is pretty cool and pretty exciting. They're basically taking those performance RT modes, it sounds like, and dubbing those the performance Pro modes and making those kind of the default here. And that extends, I guess, to Spider-Man Remastered and Spider-Man Miles Morales, which is pretty nice.
Yeah.
Beyond that, I think it just reveals how much Insomniac has been carrying the PS5, because they have four of the top heavy hitter games here, and it's nice to see those getting nice to see those getting an update. But based off of what I saw on Ratchet and Clank and Spider-Man, I think this is probably going to be a pretty worthwhile upgrade for those users. I don't have any thoughts on it beyond that, because I expect that the upgrades will be pretty similar between titles, except for some differences between different games in terms of internal resolution and also the kinds of game content. Like maybe some games are more favorable to PSSR than others, or some kinds of content are more favorable to PSSR than others. That can play into it here, but for sure, it should be pretty similar, in particular to Spider-Man 2, I imagine.
Mm-hmm. And it looks like The Last of Us Part 1 is likely to receive the same enhancements that The Last of Us Part 2 did, which essentially is an upgrade to the performance mode with PSSR. I've got to admit, I have had a look at The Last of Us Part 2 on 5 Pro. I was actually really taken aback by how good it is. Going back in the day, we looked at The Last of Us Part 2 and, fidelity versus performance mode. We kind of thought the performance mode was the place to be, because obviously it runs at 60 frames per second and the visual hit didn't seem that pronounced. But now you have the best of both worlds, and it does make a profound difference. I thought that was a really, really good enhancement. If the same thing is happening for the Last of Us Part 1, which I'm kind of reading between the lines here, that does seem to be the best way forward there. The other stuff, I guess we just had some snips of footage and not much context to it, but it does seem to be the case that it is 60 frames per second and with that enhanced clarity. But it's the other titles in Oliver's more interesting lineup of Pro enhancements that are catching my attention here. Jedi Survivor, for example, getting ray tracing in performance mode. Actually, thinking about it, Alex, you're on a kind of sabbatical from discussing anything to do with Jedi Survivor at this point, aren't you?
I think I typed that in our chat. I was like, I'm done.
You're done with Jedi Survivor. You're all Jedi'd out. I'll go to Oliver on that one then. I mean, that's quite exciting, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, well, exciting, it depends. It depends. They're talking about 60 FPS with RTAO and RT reflections, and I guess RTAO, they're talking about what we usually call RTGI in that title, because they never really discussed it beforehand, so I guess that's what they call it. One shot from the trailer counted at roughly 1080p internally across a couple of shots.
Oh, wow.
Which is respectable enough, I suppose. But they said, interestingly, kind of parsing this quote, they don't describe the Pro as delivering 4K 60 here, So I wonder if this is maybe PSSR to 1440p and it's less ambitious there. I kind of wonder about that, but I guess we'll have to see. But they do say PSSR is part of both modes, but they do emphasize that 4K rendering only for the quality mode, which I thought was interesting. But I guess the real question here is how close to 60 FPS they get there because of how questionable the base console was when RT was enabled, and given the CPU burdens that may impose, at least judging from the PC code. You kind of hope for an increase in overall playability because of the Pro enhancements and not potentially a decrease in playability. And the game is in pretty okay form right now on base PS5 in that performance mode, at least in terms of getting to a stable performance level. It's pretty much there. And again, the way they did that, which I took a look back in, I think, September of last year, is they removed the RT AO and RT reflections completely from that title. So here they're going back and doubling back and making a change there. I don't know if that's necessarily for the best, but we'll have to see.
Well, it should hopefully work out. I mean, the main issue there was basically the fact that it couldn't sustain 60 frames per second and the image quality was pretty dire because the base resolution was so low. It seems to be the case, certainly, well, we've only got a tiny bit to look at, but the base resolution looks fine. I guess it's just how well the performance holds up. Yeah, but they are also apparently doing things for the quality mode as well. Alex, anything to add there, or are you still in shun mode? You're shunning.
No, I won't shun them, but it's just hard to, as much as I think they made great things with Titanfall 1 and 2 from a technical perspective, I always feel like the Star Wars series is like overly rushed in terms of technicals. And I don't actually trust them to do it right because, like, you know, pre-release of Survivor, they were also really hyping up that, like, they finished the game so quickly. But it bared out in the results on a technical level and also a bugginess level. So I don't know, it's hard to trust them. And also based upon everything we've seen on PC, throwing in the RT on a CPU really makes some areas of the game really, really heavy. Like really, really heavy. So like the intro and the Coruscant area, just like the part when you get on that he's a senator, I believe, ship.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And like that part is just like blows CPUs out of the water still, even with like the patch, you know, something like a 7800 X3D is like sub 60 there at times. No, it's like, whoa. Yep. I don't know. I guess we'll see, but I would prefer if they, just in case, maybe kept that mode without RT, in case it isn't like a flat 60 in a good way. And that would be better because then you can maybe get even better image quality using PSSR, maybe outputting at 4K, etc. So,
okay. We also had the announcement that the Resident Evil games, it looks like Resident Evil 4 and Village, are going to be running at 120 frames per second, which I can only assume is because it doesn't have so much of a CPU burden that they're able to do that. And that kind of does assume that it is locked 120, which we just don't know at the moment.
On Resident Evil Village, they were specifically talking about 120 FPS. I don't think they talked about 120 FPS specifically for RE4 there. Right. For Village, I think 120 might be pretty doable because it's a pretty light game on the CPU from what I've seen across various testing. I think it might actually be okay there, even though I suspect that most other PS5 titles will not be okay at 120 on the Pro. I really doubt that. But they aren't describing it as using any PSSR enhancements necessarily, but they do talk about using PS5 Pro for ultra high resolution technology, which I don't know what that means. Sounds a little bit ominous. I guess that might be PSSR, might be something else. For Resident Evil 4, it's described as enabling higher frame rates and higher resolutions. Again, I'm not seeing anything that would necessarily scream PSSR, but given that it's Capcom, I just hope they don't mess up the Pro functionality because they tend to have different priorities than I would sometimes when optimizing a console game. And I just hope that, again, when we're getting these new modes, that they don't make it in some way inferior to that base console experience by doing something like trying to run the game at, like, say, native 4K here or something like that, because they could totally do that, and making the game potentially a more compromised experience in some ways than the base console is. I mean, at a kind of at a baseline, if they don't feel confident in that, then they should just give us the old modes as well. But hopefully they do a good job with those new modes.
Interesting. Dragon Age, the new game, is getting RTAO at 60 frames per second, according to your list, Oliver.
Yeah.
I mean, what can I say? I mean, I really enjoyed the trailer in the state of play, and the concept that we can actually get ray tracing at 60, I think is fantastic. So I'm eagerly awaiting that one. But what do you think?
Yeah, they're talking about using PSSR there as well, and RTAO from the fidelity mode to the performance mode, which is kind of pretty cool because they weren't using RTAO before on PS5 here, and that's the kind of thing that we do want to see a bit more of if the CPU time is there. Again, you kind of presume that in a lot of cases, maybe that's not possible, but here it does seem possible. They're adding at least one RT effect to that performance mode, and that should produce a substantially better visual experience than PS5 Pro, even outside of the potential image quality enhancements that you'd see through the use of PSSR there. So I think that's pretty cool, and it's part of a package that looks to be a pretty great looking game.
Okay, good stuff. Obviously, we're going to be following PlayStation 5 Pro enhancements very, very closely. There's still this mooted 40 to 50 games coming for launch, which, let's talk straight here. It's absolutely terrifying for us because it's just so many to do. Which ones do we cover? We had the same problem with PS4 Pro and Xbox One X back in the day. And obviously going forward, there's the fact that we've now got an extra console added to the mix for standard platform comparisons. That's going to be fun.